This is episode 212 of Teacher Approved. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. On Thursdays this summer, we are sharing a weekly Can't Miss classic, one of our favorite teacher-approved episodes that is full of timely takeaways.
We handpicked these classic episodes to be ones we know you'll want to hear this summer as you recover and prepare for a new school year.
Today, we are throwing it way back to one of our very first episodes, one that has stood the test of time and is still so relevant.
As you start planning those first few days of school, it's easy to get caught up in all the cute activities you see online.
And while those can be fun, this episode is your friendly reminder that what you do matters less than why you're doing it.
Exactly. This episode introduces a little acronym that we love, ATTA, that helps you anchor your back-to-school plans around what really counts: building community, setting expectations, easing into teaching, and getting to know your students.
It's a simple framework, but it makes such a big difference in how we approach those first weeks. Whether you're a brand new teacher or a veteran looking for a reset, this is a great tool to come back to.
So grab your planner, a cold drink, and let's talk about how to make the most of those precious first days. Let's dive in.
You're listening to Teacher Approved, the podcast helping educators elevate what matters and simplify the rest. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Emily. We're the creators behind Second Story Window, where we give research-based and teacher-approved strategies that make teaching less stressful and more effective. You can check out the show notes and resources from each episode at secondstorywindow.net.
We're so glad you're tuning in today. Let's get to the show.
Choosing your back-to-school activities can be so much fun. There are all sorts of creative ideas you'll see on social media and Pinterest this time of year. But what activities you choose aren't actually what's important. What is important is why you select the activities that you do. So you have to start with your goals for the beginning of the school year, and then make sure that the activities you select support your goals. We came up with an acronym to help us remember our beginning of the school year goals. That acronym is ATTA, and it stands for affirming, training, teaching, assessing at the beginning of the year. Now, we're not suggesting that your students are puppies in need of training, even if that's how it feels sometimes, but we found that this is a handy acronym for helping us remember what our goals are.
So the first A in ATTA is affirming. Here's what an objective of affirming students looks like to us. It means intentionally creating a peaceful classroom space that's safe and welcoming to students. It's looking for opportunities to give students ownership and choice. It's striving to recognize each student as a unique and valuable individual in our classroom community where their contributions are recognized. It's providing time for fun and community building activities. But that's not all. Affirming also looks like setting clear expectations so students know the boundaries and limits of our classroom community. It means establishing a clear and predictable routine. Those might not be the things that come immediately to your mind when you think of affirming, but we would argue that they're just as important, if not more important, than the other plans for affirming. The reason clear expectations and boundaries are important is because they help students know how to behave. A student who doesn't know what behavior is expected of them will often act out in search of what the boundaries are. Once they know what the expectations are in our space, they can feel more comfortable and secure. And that's true for a predictable routine as well. I don't know about you, but when I walk into a brand new environment, I'm often uneasy when I don't know what to expect there. On the other hand, when I go into a situation where the routines are predictable, I am immediately at ease. We don't want our kids coming into school every day wondering what their classroom life will look like. Our goal is for them to feel completely secure knowing that the day will follow predictable routines that they can always count on.
The first T in ATTA stands for training. This means that ahead of time, I have a clear picture of how I want things to run in my class, and I plan to explicitly teach how I want things done. Having a goal of training means dedicating a significant amount of time at the beginning of the year to teach procedures and routines. Training also means giving feedback and praise, as well as support to students as they undertake learning procedures. It's making sure that students are aware ahead of time of the consequences of their choices. The second T in ATTA is for the actual teaching I'll be doing. At the beginning of the year, teaching means reviewing content from the previous year, building reading stamina, easing into teaching this year's content. We're also teaching when we introduce the learning routines that we'll be using all year, so they can do them more efficiently the rest of the time. Teaching is also making plans to transition from review to new content. And the last A in Attaboy is for assessing. Assessing looks like making informal, observational assessments of academic and social strengths and struggles. It means monitoring how well students are able to meet expectations. And of course, there's some formal assessment that needs to happen at the beginning of the year, too, to get a benchmark for literacy and math skills. Then that information is used to group students for small group support. And we also want to be sure to establish any needed interventions as early as possible in the year.
These 4 areas are critical to the success of the whole school year, so I really consider what achieving those goals would look like. Then I choose the specific activities that I know will meet them. For example, one of the things on my to-do list for the first week is to post some sort of display out in the hallway. Now, there are approximately 8 billion fun craftivities on Pinterest that I could choose from. But these first days are precious, and I don't want to fill time with an activity that's not enhancing my larger aims. So I look at my goals and what needs do I need to meet. For me, I decided to focus on affirming by recognizing my students as individuals. So I planned for my class to do some kind of all-about-me activity that we could hang in the hall. But that doesn't make this the only right option. I could have looked at my goals for training and wanted something that would provide me with the opportunity to introduce scissors and glue. In that case, I might have picked a cut and paste type craft. I could have chosen teaching or assessing and decided I wanted to do some sort of math-based art project that reviews first grade math concepts. Any of those choices not only meets the goal of getting something in the hallway, but it also supports my deeper goals of shaping my classroom environment. The key is to think about what you need to accomplish in the first days of school, and then choose activities that help you meet your higher Attaboy goals. The activities you choose are less important than your reasons for choosing them. You won't get these first few days back, so be intentional in how you feel them. The purpose with Attaboy goals is to establish the solid foundation necessary to build a successful year. In May, I want my class to function as a community of learners who are respectful to each other, independent workers, and creative thinkers. That means I need to lay the foundation for that from the very beginning. We're going to take a look at how you can use affirming, training, teaching, and assessing to inform your plans. We'll share what each of those areas looks like on the first day of school, during the first weeks of school, and how they work to launch you into your best year yet.
So let's start with affirming. To set my goals for affirming on the first day of school, I start with asking myself, how do I want my students to feel on the first day of school? My answer to that would be, I want my students to feel safe and welcomed. I want them to feel they have a recognized place and ownership in the classroom. Then I would plan to meet that goal in a few ways. Before school even starts, I'm going to make sure that my students see their names posted around the room and on the door when they arrive to meet the teacher and on the first day of school. Then when they get there, they instantly know, I'm in the right place. There's a spot saved here for me. I plan our first day of school to include time for each student to be welcomed and introduced to the group. I make sure that nothing we do on the first day, when those nerves are running high, will make anyone feel like they're on the spot or singled out negatively. I purposely create a calm, welcoming atmosphere. The stakes are low and the nurturing is high on that first day. To set my goals for affirming in the first week of school, I start with asking myself, how do I want my students to feel during the first week of school? My answer to that would be, I want my students to feel a sense of classroom community and have a place to safely express their individuality. I want them to feel they have ownership and accountability. Then I would use that goal to plan activities for the first week. For me, that looks like including my kids in generating the class rules. It means we start learning the basic procedures for morning meeting. I make sure to plan the first week to include lots of activities that will build our sense of community.
To plan my training goals for the first day of school, I ask myself, what would I like my students to be able to do by the end of the first day? I want to begin the process of making my students as independent as possible. So my training on the first day focuses on helping them learn how to efficiently get what they need and get where they need to be. Basically, the first day is broken up into a pattern of teach a procedure, do an activity, teach a procedure, do an activity. You have to break up all the talking so no one is getting burned out. During the course of the first day, we cover our most important procedures like how to come to the reg, how to line up, how to walk in the hall. All those fun things they'll need to be able to do to be successful in our class. If you listen to our episode about classroom procedures and routines, we shared exactly how we teach procedures using the tell, try, tally method. You can find this in episode 18. Besides the procedures for how to do things on the first day, I introduce guidelines for how to manage materials. I start with our two most frequently used tools, crayons and pencils. I introduce these using a method called guided discovery, and we will have a full episode about guided discovery in just a couple of weeks. But the short version is that I take the time during the first weeks of school to establish clear expectations and procedures around each of the school tools we use on a regular basis. And maybe that sounds a little boring, but we promise it's actually a lot of fun. Now it's time to plan for training in the first weeks of school. I ask myself, what would I like my students to be able to do by the end of the first week? And my answer is, I want students to understand how to be successful during each part of the day. Our class will settle into a predictable rhythm after the first couple weeks. I'm using these early days to teach the steps in our routines. It's math time, so this is where you need to go. It's spelling time. Here are the materials you need. Every day they're getting a clearer understanding of what to expect and how to function independently in our space. Throughout the first week, I continue introducing the materials we use. Scissors, glue, stapler, markers, all of the fun things. I make a formal introduction for each tool because I just want to prevent future problems. Besides classroom routines during the first week, I make a point to teach routines that relate to the school. Lunch procedures, fire drills, going to and from an assembly, lining up for the bus, and any other necessary procedures. Emily, tell us about planning for teaching.
Yeah, so to plan for teaching on the first day of school, I ask myself, how can I help my students today to be successful with the learning tasks we will be doing all year? My answer is I will start by teaching my students how to do the first, most important daily learning task that we do each day, morning work. On the first day, we actually do morning work in the afternoon after I've taught them how to manage pencils. I teach them where their books are kept and we work through the first page as a class. I teach them step by step how to complete their morning work. Why do I introduce morning work on the very first day? Because I want them to be independent with this task right away and be able to come in the door tomorrow and know exactly what to do. And of course, I'll be there to help them if they can't quite remember on the first few days. We're taking our first little baby steps toward independent learners. Then I plan for teaching in the first week of school by asking myself, how can I use the time in this first week to begin some meaningful teaching instead of just filling time? My goal for that is I will teach my students how to do the important learning tasks we will do all year. That means getting them accustomed to the flow of a normal school day. In the first week, I make sure to introduce the academic routines we'll do every week. Word sorting, vocabulary, independent reading, etc. I also spend a couple days introducing math manipulatives before we dive into our first unit.
Now it's time to plan for some assessment on the first day of school. I ask myself, what would I like to know a little more about my students by the end of the first day? My goal is to get a picture of where students are academically and socially. For the most part, on the first day of school, we're basically just affirming and training. But I'm also doing some very, very informal assessment of the kids. I'm taking a look at how they're doing socially when they interact with their peers. I'm also looking at any work they're producing to start to form a picture of how they're doing academically. Again, all of this is very informal. The activities I choose for the first day are intentionally low-key. Definitely nothing academically challenging. So if I spot someone struggling to complete one of these activities, I know right away that I need to watch that child a little closer. Maybe it's just first day nerves, maybe it's a deeper problem. I might not know right away, but this helps me to start to dial into the kids in my class. Then I need to plan for assessment in the first week of school. I ask, what's the most important assessment information I'd like to get about my students right away? My goal is to begin to get a picture of where students are academically and socially. I plan time to give reading benchmarks and spelling assessments. I work on some math assessments too. For any academic content in the first week, I focus on reviewing first grade material. This allows me to quickly assess where they're at on those first grade topics. To get an idea of how my students function socially, I go out for a recess for the first few days, even if I'm not on recess duty. And yes, it does feel like a sacrifice.
I was going to say, that's a big sacrifice.
It is. But I really feel like it pays off in giving me the information I need to know how well things are going on the playground. Like, can everyone follow the rules? Does everyone have someone to play with? And after that, I start to back off a little unless I need to monitor a certain situation.
So how do you apply this idea to areas we didn't cover? The Attaboy framework can help you decide what is most important in any area of planning you need to do at the start of the new school year. Start by thinking about the outcome you want in that particular area. Then consider what part of the Attaboy framework might best apply to the situation: affirming, training, teaching, or assessing. And remember, in a lot of these cases, there's no right or wrong answer. Then, with one of those areas in mind, decide how best to specifically meet your goal. Using the Attaboy framework will help you keep what's most important in mind while you plan out the nitty-gritty of the first weeks of your new school year. We hope this episode gave you a fresh lens for thinking about your first days back, not as a checklist of Instagram-worthy activities, but as an opportunity to lay a foundation that really lasts.
Because when you start with the why, everything else falls into place. And that Attaboy framework is your back-to-school bestie.
Whether you're printing name tags or brainstorming how to build classroom culture, we hope this tool helps you feel grounded and confident in your choices.
And if this episode sparked an idea or reminded you of something important, share it with a teacher friend. It might be just what they need right now, too.
We'll be back next Thursday with another can't-miss classic to support you through this season of planning, prepping, and maybe even pausing to rest.
Until then, keep your why close, your cold drink closer, and remember, you've got this.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Teacher Approved. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Emily. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe in your podcast app so that you never miss an episode.
You can connect with us and other teachers in the Teacher Approved Facebook group. We'll see you here next week. Bye for now.
Bye.